Hello and welcome to this episode of the Freedom Seeker Show. I'm Yvonne Winkler, your host for today, and this is where we have unfiltered conversations that matter to women. And today I have a very special guest here with me. Her name is Ame-Lia Tamburrini, and allow me to introduce you to her. She is a podcast host, a circle facilitator, and the CEO of Hum Consulting, an organization creating brave spaces for conversations that heal. With over 15 years working with Indigenous communities across the globe and going through her own personal transformation, Ame-Lia applies ancient wisdom to transformation to bring about profound change. Yeah, you do. Her unique blend of compassion, directness, and humor help clients and listeners embrace the courageous journey of turning inward to bring about a harmonious, united world. With a new lease on life, and you'll have to tell us a little bit more about that, she wants nothing more than to help curious change makers build these skills in everyone, so we can all experience love and joy. Welcome, Ame-Lia. It is so good to have you on the Freedom Seeker Show, and I can't think of a better timing than to have this conversation today about how to have transformative conversations in a kind way. We are in the middle of a very polarized world, and I resonated with you immediately when I met you at one of an event that we both attended, and you were actually the facilitator. And I got to experience exactly what Ame-Lia is all about, which is she held the space for us to come together and have really difficult conversations about diversity and race and gender and all of these often debilitating conversations for me personally, because they bring up a lot of triggers and I don't know what to say, or I don't want to offend anyone, and you just did such a wonderful job of really creating the space for us. We were all strangers. Like, we weren't in a workshop for days on end already. We were all strangers coming together, and you just did such a fabulous job creating that space that I said, I want you on the Freedom Seeker Show and help me and our viewers understand how we can have conversations that matter in a kind way. So welcome. I would love to know, let's start out, I ask this question often to my guests, but what lights you up about your work, and when did you first feel that spark to create these safe spaces for conversations?
Thank you. I love that question. And just to say, it's such an honor to be here and real pleasure. I think we don't know each other well, but we're learning and getting to know each other, and we're total soul sisters on many levels, from our thoughts to our clothes to
So true.
Yeah, so it's a joy, and actually, yeah, it's quite fun to be here with you today. So thanks.
For the second time around, but we love it.
We love it. So where did this spark start for me? I think it really began at the end of a health journey. And to back that up, I started my business 2.5 years ago, and it really stemmed from a lot of years of engaging with communities around the world around pretty contentious issues, where I got to bring their voice into these decisions with the hopes that decision makers would then make a better decision around how their projects would impact the health and well-being of community. And so that was the experience I came in with, and I wanted to do community engagement in a really meaningful way. And then 1 month after starting my business, I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Yeah. And you know, those are big moments in life. And once I got over the shock of the diagnosis, I knew right away that this experience was here to serve me in some way, to really deepen what it is that I was doing in the world and how I was showing up. And so for my journey, and I think this is common for people in the cancer journey and maybe other chronic illnesses, is you get diagnosed, there's a lot of shock, and then you get your treatment plan, and then from that point on, it's really about survival. So you're just really focused on, how am I going to get through this day, this week, this next treatment. And then once you emerge from that and your supports have sort of trickled away, you're left in this world of really getting to know yourself and the world around you in a whole new way. And for me, that meant doing a lot of my deeper healing work, looking back at my own childhood, my own trauma, and really seeing it as that for the first time. Mm-hmm. And doing that exploration changed my view of the world. And all of a sudden, I could see that it wasn't just me that had unhealed trauma that was impacting how I was showing up in the world. It was everybody, a lot of people. And that's when I switched the focus of my business to focus more on helping people to heal. And I knew that my special way to do that was to change the way that we come together to have conversation. Yeah.
I'm really sad to hear how you had to arrive to that. But I am very grateful and thankful that you had the consciousness and the ability and maybe even the support around you to get to that place of recognizing that's your purpose, that's why you're here, and that's the message that you have for the world. And again, I have been amongst several facilitators over the years in my personal development journey and professional development as well. And I know from my own experience it takes a lot to hold a room together and to bring conversations together. But like you said, to actually bring a room together and not just talk, but to bring them together and have a transformative experience where we're all walking away feeling like our cup is full and not empty, is a very special skill, and it requires so many maybe not obvious things that happen. So I really appreciate the work in the world that you do. We need you, and I'm so glad you're doing it. Oh, it's really important. Tell us, what is the Be the Change program? Because that's one of the ways to work with you, correct? Yeah,
that is true. And I just want to go back because you touched on transformation, and I think you asked earlier what lights me up about my work, and it's the transformation that lights me up. I can reflect on my own transformation, living a life that was good, but I was also very angry and resentful and, questioning a lot and not feeling particularly safe. And I live in a very different way right now. And I see this when people walk in the room. There's often a lot of divisiveness. There's not a lot of trust. And people are really strong in their positions. And then as we work together, those positions melt away and we really get to the root of what's happening, and the shared values start to come to light. And then these new possibilities emerge that weren't there when they walked in the room. And so for me, that's what lights me up. Yeah. I can totally see that. And if we could just go back to that again before we talk about Be the Change. Mm-hmm. I just really want to reiterate that there is actually a process that has to happen. It's I think very unrealistic to think that after centuries, decades of not coming together and talking in a I don't even know what the word would be. You probably have a perfect word for it, but to come together and share. Doesn't always mean being of the same mindset or being of the same opinions or even necessarily agreeing with each other. It just means having a respect for one another, that we can come to the table and have a transformative experience and a solution, possibilities. I think last time we talked about this, you used the word possibilities, and I just love that so much because that's what I feel very strongly about. I think that when we come together and we all have a seat at the table and we can all share what our concerns are and acknowledge what our experiences are, we can make space for that possibility of a solution or of a different way or of a transformation. So
But there's a process. And is that something that you teach in Be the Change, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we take people through the process. So we start with self-awareness, because it's so important to get to know ourselves, why we show up the way we do, why we get triggered, and where that comes from, in order to transform it and really become aware of our reactions and act in more conscious ways. So that's step one, and we spend a lot of time there because it's big, important work. Then we shift, and it's not a step by step, it's sort of all included, but trauma-informed ways of being together is another important piece of it, because there is a lot of unhealed trauma in the world, and it's really about shifting that perspective from asking what is wrong with you and blaming to what happened to you, and really being curious about people's stories and seeing where that leads you. And then we get into communicating, and how do we communicate with one another in ways that don't cause harm. Some people call this nonviolent communication, and it's really about communicating with love and communicating from our heart versus our head or other places. And then we also touch on how do we gather together in new ways where everybody's voice can be heard, and where everybody holds knowledge and that knowledge is valued. And we do all of that so that the groups can get to a point of seeing the world through a different lens and creating those new possibilities for themselves.
It sounds like there's a lot of things that have to happen first, but from my experience, one of those, let me roll it back for a second. I feel like for me, when I'm observing my own hesitation around having conversations or difficult conversations, it's often because I have this feeling that we need to be in agreement with, or that there's a right side and a wrong side. And I just love what you said, that we have to need to bring a bit more love and kindness to the dialogue, rather than being on this defensive point of view. And one of the things I've noticed about us in general is that there is no more room, it feels, for acknowledging that the experience or the place that the other person is coming from. I think it's called compassion. And there is a lack of it, I feel, and I'm just as guilty of it. I'm not saying that I'm just as guilty of it. Why do you think communication has gotten so difficult? Like, why do you think that happened?
Yeah, it's a great question and a good observation too. I feel that as well in a lot of circumstances. For me, it trickles back to the unhealed trauma that is there. Because when we go through experiences where we are not feeling safe, and that could look like a spectrum of things. Gabor Mate is one of my mentors, and he talks about trauma in really beautiful ways, but everybody essentially has experienced some form of trauma. And when we're in that place of not feeling safe, we start to develop defensive mechanisms and ways of being that protect ourselves. And that works as a kid, and it's probably an okay thing as a kid to keep us safe. But when we become adults, it no longer serves us, and it doesn't lead to more love and joy and connection. And so I think those ways of being, defensiveness, blaming, looking outward instead of inward, all of that is just our way of trying to be safe. And when I can look at somebody and see their anger rise and then know instinctively that that has nothing to do with me, that is hitting some stuff of theirs, instantly there's more compassion that's present. A door opens to see somebody differently, also because possibly you can relate, that you've also, you know your own pain, you know your own trauma, you know that they are also in a very painful place. And so there's an opportunity there to really show love to that person versus hatred.
So it sounds to me like we really need to start with trauma work. with
it's important.
Peeling back some of the layers or the protective mechanisms that we have, the protective layers that we have built around our hearts to protect us, to keep us safe. I definitely feel that. Like I can relate to it. Just as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah. There are a lot of layers, and I've been working for years on trying to dismantle some of them, and there's always still more coming up. So what would you say then, before we get into adult conversations, is there something you can think of that maybe parents can already do with their children right now just to set them up? Because I heard you say that, maybe as children that served us, but there isn't really it may not serve us in adulthood, and then there doesn't sound to be like there is a learning there anywhere. Like we don't learn this in school. So is there something parents can do to already kind of plant some seeds with their kids?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think parents need to do their work in order to get there, first of all. One thing that I notice is a lack of space for kids' voices to be heard in the household. Like the go-to is that the parents are the knowledge keepers, and yet kids are in such a beautiful state in life where they have less traumas built up over time, and so they're really tapped into a different way of being. And I think if parents can create spaces for their kids to use their voice and just get curious about what's going on, or instead of reacting when their kid does something that hits one of their triggers, that they just create space for maybe curiosity, and just ask good questions of their kids. What's going on for you right now? What do you feel right now in this moment? I think allowing kids to speak from that deeper place will transform things.
Yeah, I hear being present, which goes right back to the first thing you said, for parents to do their work and to do their part to heal their own trauma, but also to be effectively present in today. Like there's the past work, but then there's also just staying present, and we talked about it just today in setting up, that presence is so important to just get through the day. So can we bring it to today, into current world affairs for a moment? What would you recommend we can do to have to disarm some of these some of this divisiveness and the polarization that is happening?
Yeah, I think first and foremost it's getting commitment, committing for yourself what you want to contribute to in the world, because we have a choice every single day, every moment. We can either contribute to more divisiveness and fear, or we can contribute to more connection and love. And so what are you committed to? And then checking in with that every day, because it's work. It's a process. And when we can set in our intention for the day and say, you know what, I'm gonna create magic today. I'm gonna create connection today. Then you step into your day differently. And I think that's really important as a start, is just really get clear, and then different ways of being will evolve, and I can talk more about that. Yeah. I
love that, and again I hear just a very strong piece around presence and intention, really. Who do I want to be? Do I want to be contributing to the problem, or do I want to be contributing to the solution? Do I do I want to be, like, I love actually that you use the word choice, because on the Freedom Seeker show, freedom is all about choice, and it comes from within. So we can choose who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world. And that doesn't mean I have to have it all figured out, but simply setting an intention that I want to be part of a better world. And in your words, you use a harmonious world. The intentions around that is really important, setting that intention and just making a commitment to that. So that basically answers my next question, which was, what can each of us do to create that more harmonious world? And at an earlier interview that we did together, we were talking about that ripple effect. So for me, in my journey, that became very obvious to me, how taking care of me first and foremost really has an impact on everyone around me. And it starts with this inner circle, and then it goes out in the next circle, and then in the next and the next, and then influencing the whole world. My mom and dad and I, there's only three of us, we often have used to have long breakfast conversations when I still lived with them. And I think it was, from a family standpoint, our favorite thing was breakfast conversations. Now my dad's old school, so he's very much like a debater. And he could debate for hours, but we never really reach a point of resolution or a solution. And it would drive me nuts, because I'm like, well, what are we going to do about it? We can keep talking about this and talking about it. I wanted to get to the solution of it. And he would always say, well, there's nothing really we can do, and I would not take that. Like, I remember that so strongly in me, to that resistance around, no, what do you mean we have to take it for what it is? Like, we can do something. Like, this is a person who signs petitions and used to fight for the whales and all of that stuff. So I'm like, no, we can do something. And I don't know exactly at what point of my inner journey that actually became very obvious that I'm the solution. If I focus on me, and if I make sure I'm okay and I'm staying in my own lane, then the ripple effects will take care of themselves. Yes. And that's how one person can have an impact on the whole world. And then you get two people together, and then three people together, and we're all changing the world together. So I really love that, what you said about commitment and intention.
Yeah, I love that too. That's our podcast, The Circle of Change. It's really all about that. It's how do we change the world from within. And we have conversations that really help people like this think about the world a little bit differently, right, from a new lens. And I think that, for me, hones in on this quality of curiosity, which, speaking of a very tangible thing that people can do, I think the quality of curiosity is beautiful for softening dialogue and softening the edges. Even if you think about the pandemic that we're in right now, and some people are choosing to be vaccinated and some people are choosing not to. And if you stepped into those conversations with genuine curiosity about, why did you make this decision? What was important to you about that? What was it? What will it mean for you, for your life? Then we can talk, we can have a different kind of conversation. And in that conversation, guaranteed there will be some common values that come out. And from that place is where we can really start to find solutions that work for everybody. And I feel as though that hasn't been the case, and it's ripping families apart and communities apart. And it's heartbreaking. And we weren't necessarily taught the skills, like you said earlier, to have these types of conversations. So that's really why I'm committed to doing the work I'm doing, so that we don't have to get to this state.
I was really curious about that, because I wonder how this divisiveness that's happening in the world is impacting you and your work. Did it help you, just dig in deeper and go, yes, I'm committed more than ever, or were you really defeated by it?
Yeah, no, the former. It really helped me commit to the work that I'm doing. Yeah, I generally look at the world as full of opportunities, not so much the challenges. So for me, it was just another sign from the universe to keep going, to keep doing this work, keep supporting in whatever way that I can. Yeah.
The one of the questions that came up for me, that wasn't one of the ones we had discussed, but how can someone hone more curiosity?
It's a good question.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's an interesting question, because I definitely have people in my life that they would say, I'm just generally not curious about other people. And I think that's fine too. I think it goes back again to just honoring people where they're at. I get a lot out of curiosity.
Me too.
And it instigates beautiful conversations. I learn more about the world, and through learning more about the world, I learn more about myself, and I love that journey. Not everybody loves that journey. So I think if you're going to hone it, it's really finding your personal why. Why is that important to you to get more curious? What could that provide for you in your life?
That's a beautiful answer. And I'll add to it, I think for me, my curiosity got bigger when I started this, like the interviewing, because I wanted to bring conversations, much like the Circle of Change. I wanted to bring conversations to women that matter, and that requested of me to really dig a little deeper, right? I mean, I've always been a very deep thinker. I'm sure a lot of my friends really did not appreciate how deep I usually go into the conversations. But my curiosity was not something that was lacking. I was always very curious, but I was definitely honing it more as a skill, or as, when I started this show. So for those of you who would love to get more curious, maybe you could just think of some questions and maybe write them down, and before you go into another networking meeting, or into another conversation, or maybe gathering with friends and family. I mean, Thanksgiving is coming up, maybe think about some things that you could genuinely be curious about with your family that you don't know yet, to just have some different conversations rather than the same old. How is the weather? And
I agree, especially when there's that issue that comes up in those family gatherings, and you're like, oh boy, we can't go there. It's either people have just pushed it aside and be like, we know we can't talk about this. Those are the topics that you can get really curious about, and maybe not in a direct manner, but start asking questions around it, so that you get to know those people deeper and understand why it is they show up the way they do, and then their perspective that they keep bringing to the table around that issue might become more clear to you, where it's not personally offending you anymore, but it's just, oh, you understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe that's what we should label this episode, is like how to have a Thanksgiving conversation without without killing one another. But it just occurs to me that is probably for many households a big deal. And a lot of anxiety goes into that leading up to it. Should we be able to have Thanksgiving together with our families this year, which I really hope we do, then what does that look like? And often when you see shows on TV, whatever, that kind of cater to how-tos, they would say, well, avoid this conversation, avoid politics and whatnot. And here we are saying, well, maybe try a different technique. Get curious instead of avoiding the conversation altogether. I mean, if you feel safe to do that. For me personally, I'll speak to my own experience. There are certain conversations that are just not really making the dinner table anymore, because we just don't ever seem to be able to get past a point of frustration, and that's not. But again, that goes to what you said about how do we want to show up. And so we've decided, because we care and honor the family more than we care about the topic, we just omitted talking about this, particular thing, and maybe what it will require is to have someone like you come in and help us facilitate a conversation like that sometime, which is what I would love to wrap up. I mean, we can talk for hours about this topic, but when you say everyone's voice matters, my question for you is, how can we bring everyone to the table?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this does relate back to what we were just speaking of. So I do host most of my conversations in a circle format, and there's a key principle there that everybody is a knowledge keeper. And we honor that. Sometimes we use a talking piece, and when you're holding that talking piece, you are the knowledge keeper. You have space to share your wisdom, and then you pass the talking piece. And then that person is the knowledge keeper, and they get to share their wisdom, and everybody else is listening. And around it goes, and perspectives shifts, and ahas emerges, and people's new possibilities arise through that process. So I think that is one thing that we can all do, is start to look at what is the paradigm we're using for who is a knowledge keeper. I think sometimes we get stuck in, the politician is a knowledge keeper, or the parents are a knowledge keeper, or the CEOs or people with degrees are knowledge keepers. But everybody has this wealth of knowledge from all the years that they've been living, from their ancestors and beyond, depending on what you believe. So, and there's all that wisdom to tap into. We just need to create space for it and shift up the way in which we gather so that we can harvest all of that wisdom. So going back to the family dialogue, maybe it's not so much you dive into that issue that is a hot button issue. That's kind of actually a codependent way of being, to be like, because there's an underground belief there that you're going to change people by continuing to bring it up. But what if you just started to toss a question out at the dinner table and have everybody answer it? Like, what is it about Thanksgiving that you really love? Or what is one childhood memory that lights you up? You get to start to know people on a deeper level, and that's really the way about it. And then eventually you can wind your way into these deeper topics if necessary, but even if you don't go there, your perspective might shift of that person, and you just soften your position, and you're able to see those people differently.
Oh, wow. I love that. Thank you so much for dropping that. I think that is incredibly valuable information right there. Thanksgiving is saved. So if we want to learn more from you and your facilitation and your programs, where do we go?
Yeah, head to my website, humconsulting.ca. There you can sign up for a monthly newsletter, and I just come into your inbox once a month and give support, tips and tricks on how to have deep, meaningful conversations. And that's one way. Certainly the podcast, Circle of Change. We have weekly episodes on Thursdays, and I'm also on Instagram. Again, just really trying to give people the tools and supports needed to be the change, because it's a courageous path, and I think we need support as we go along this journey.
Hands down, and I'll echo that. There is a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of people, a lot of podcasters. So if you had got any value from this conversation, make sure you subscribe to Circle of Change podcast with Ame-Lia Tamburrini. I'll also include the link on the bottom of this, and subscribe here too, Freedom Seeker Show, because then you can always come back and watch this again. Thank you so much for being with us today and imparting your incredible wisdom on us. And thanks for doing the work you do.
Thank you. It's been such a blessing to be here.
Hey love, did you enjoy this conversation? Then join in at www.yvonnewinkler.com/blog and leave me a comment of what you liked about this episode and why. If this added value to your life, then please share this with all of your friends on social media and hashtag The Freedom Seeker Show. I really appreciate you watching and helping me spread the word. And as a token of my appreciation for sharing this episode, your name will be entered into my monthly gratitude draw for a chance to win something from my favorite product list. So don't forget the hashtag, The Freedom Seeker Show. I'll see you next time. Rise, bloom, and radiate.